So it's not a chore. It's actually quite fun, and it's actually quite revealing. I tell a story in the book about when I had my office. As you mentioned in the intro, I sold my company a few years back, but when I had my office, it was in a typical office building, and we had a typical maintenance guy, who took care of the landscaping and fixed anything that broken. And he was just kind of the maintenance guy, right? You don't pay attention to somebody like that often. But as I mentioned, I began to get to know him and ask him some questions, and found out I live in South Florida, where there's a lot of Latin influence, especially Cubans. Found out this guy escaped Cuba on a tire tube, on a truck tire tube. He floated 93 miles across the Florida Straits from Cuba to Miami.
Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Steve Fales. Steve is an accomplished professional whose extensive career has left a significant mark on the realms of advertising and marketing. After founding Ad Services, Inc. in 1989 and successfully guiding it through decades of innovation until its acquisition in 2020, he has pivoted towards a fulfilling phase of consulting, mentoring, and volunteering, focusing on fostering mutually beneficial relationships and enriching the business community. His dedication to personal development is further exemplified through his engagement in endurance sports and chess, reflecting a commitment to lifelong learning and improvement. Through his current endeavors, including leadership roles with the Venture Mentoring Team and Predator Advisory, he exemplifies the essence of effective communication and mentorship, elegantly intertwining professional insights with a profound passion for human connection. Congrats on leaving a significant mark on advertising and marketing, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks a lot, Karl, and congratulations to you for having such a wonderful show here. As you say, it's all about human connection, and you do a good job with all your episodes of promoting that. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think it's going to segues well into what we're going to be talking about here, which is there's a kind of lack of connection between people in the work world, and between employees. They don't really feel like they know their team members well, and they might not feel like they have many friends at work, or at least not the same sort of friends that they have in their personal lives. And so you seem like the perfect person to talk to about how people can build these sort of relationships in their work world, because with all the stresses and challenges they're dealing with, having people that can really rely on it makes it a lot easier. So how do you recommend people go about making friends at work?
Well, I think the problem with friendship is not only at work, but it's an epidemic in our society in general, right? And we spend an immense amount of our time at work, so that those relationships are extremely important to us. Of course, we have to prioritize getting the work done, but I think we can go a little deeper in those relationships on the job. For example, just asking people questions about their lives. And we don't have to probe deep and interrogate people, but on any given Monday, right, we come to work, say, what'd you do over the weekend? Somebody says, I went to a movie. What happens after that? I wrote a book about relationships and friendships, and I have something in there I call a conversation poker. And that's what typically happens. Somebody says, what'd you do over the weekend? I went to a movie. And the next person just upstages that, says, well, I went to the beach. They don't think about what the other person said and ask a question. We would get much closer to people and build our relationships if we said something like, oh, really? What movie did you see? Did you like it? Who'd you go with? And just ask a few questions and get a little deeper. Without, as I said, we don't have to get into great interrogation, but people like to feel like they're being heard, and asking a few questions as a follow-up to things people tell you is a good way to do that. So that is just one practical tip I would give, and I do mention it in the book.
Yeah, I think it's a flavor of that. Any sort of question along the lines of like, tell me more about what someone just said, and like, and also, and including a little bit of what they said in their response, like, oh, not to say, tell me more, but it's like, what movie did you see, or like, where did you go see it, and just those sorts of follow-up questions are great, because not only does it show you actually were listening to what they were saying, because you kind of repeat back some of the words they said in their response, but it builds such a stronger connection with them, because we all crave that being seen, heard, and understood. And when it was the initial question, how was your weekend or whatever, at least you're seeing them, but you're not necessarily hearing them until you ask that follow-up and show that you listened to what they said and actually were interested in it. Because I think people are so focused on trying to come across as being interesting to other people.
Exactly.
And they think that's what's going to get them the relationships. But in reality, it's about showing interest, being interested in other people, and not trying to one-up them with the conversation poker, which I like that analogy, because the story toppers get a reputation in the office of like, oh my gosh, people can't stand that person because they're constantly trying to one-up people, and it just comes across as a deep insecurity instead of someone who can let the focus be on someone else and listen to them.
Yeah. And the other thing is that people are very interesting. You learn a lot when you ask these questions. You get a lot of interesting stories. So it's not a chore. It's actually quite fun, and it's actually quite revealing. I tell a story in the book about when I had my office. As you mentioned in the intro, I sold my company a few years back, but when I had my office, it was in a typical office building, and we had a typical maintenance guy, who took care of the landscaping and fixed anything that broken. And he was just kind of the maintenance guy, right? You don't pay attention to somebody like that often. But as I mentioned, I began to get to know him and ask him some questions, and found out I live in South Florida, where there's a lot of Latin influence, especially Cubans. Found out this guy escaped Cuba on a tire tube, on a truck tire tube. He floated 93 miles across the Florida Straits from Cuba to Miami to get here. I mean, how fascinating. What a fascinating story. And if you just passed him off as, oh, that's just the maintenance guy, you would miss that. And it was just amazing to find. And the thing is that everybody has a story. Everybody you meet has a story. I talk about seeing people as individuals. We go to the coffee shop, and there is what? The barista. That's not just the barista. That's a person with a whole family, with a story, with dreams. And again, you can't get into an intimate conversation while you're picking up your coffee. But if you just ask somebody, how are you doing? Tell me something about yourself. What's going on in your world? It's amazing how people will tell you things, because you used a great word. You said people crave that, and they do. They crave it. And when you provide that to people, you become their favorite person on earth. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually last week. Every other week I have a Toastmasters meeting, and
great.
I was talking about. I presented the last meeting, and I was talking about one of my favorite ways to start these sort of conversations with people and build those sort of connections is by giving people compliments, but by doing it the way that you're not complimenting on anything about them that wasn't a choice of theirs. So like commenting on their outfit, or like how they style their hair, if they dye their hair, or something where it's a choice they made on how they want to express themselves, how they want to show up, how they want to be seen. So commenting on that, but then not just saying, oh, nice shirt or whatever, but having it be, giving a reason why it stood out to me, why it had an impact. And then when they respond, and again, one of the things I mentioned was asking that follow-up, like, so tell me more about like this aspect of what I just commented on. And you do learn little things about the person. And again, like, you don't have to dive completely into their background and learn all about them in one conversation, but you tip your toe in the water and get a sense of who they are and their humanity. And it leads to some really fun conversations. And you, especially in the workplace, when you're trying to collaborate with people or problem solve or overcome challenges where there's a lot of stress or stakes, when you know the people you're working with beyond their job title and skill set, and you see them as actual people, actual human beings, and have that perspective, then it makes dealing with the challenges of the job or just deadlines or whatever a lot easier, because you're less likely to assume, or you're less likely to have conflicts that can't be resolved, because you have a deeper connection with people, so you understand them better and able to find resolutions more quickly because there's that understanding.
I agree 100%. And Karl, I'm sure you're all over this, but it also has tremendous benefits in business with customers and clients, because again, people want to do business with people they like, and people like people who take an interest in them. So by taking an interest in other people, you gain their appreciation. They like you. They want to do business with you. But the thing of it is, you can't do it just for that purpose, because people see through that. They see through insincerity immediately. So, but as I said earlier, it's extremely easy to be sincere about your interest in others because people are so interesting. So when you enter someone's office and you ask them how they're doing and you get to know a little bit about them and their story, you might find out just how interesting they are. So.
Yeah, and I also, one of the things I've done differently is, instead of asking people like, how are you doing, or kind of the general things with, how are you doing? Fine. And then it's like, obviously no one's just fine, or no one's like, it's having either a follow-up, like, well, tell me what's the most like exciting thing you're most excited about. Tell me something you're like, asking a follow-up question to that fine answer, or the good, or like the standard kind of intro to a conversation. Again, not like prying if it seems like there's something really like heavy that they're not wanting to share it, but it's at least showing that you're not just going through the motions with someone, that you actually genuinely want to learn more about how they're doing beyond the standard like greeting, is something that has really opened up a lot of great conversations with people and built stronger relationships than you get just by kind of going through the motions that like so many people do, even with especially like clients or someone who you're trying to either have a business relationship or you're trying to build one. I had someone on the one of the episodes that dropped last week, so I'm talking about, it should take 10 minutes of every like business meeting just to talk about non-business stuff with people, clients, team members, and just that 10 minutes of just connecting with your team as a person, not talking about the agenda for the meeting, of just how are things going, let's check in. I don't remember the exact stat she quoted, but it was like measurables impact on like productivity and on like the client results, like all like the KPIs that companies are tracking, wasn't by making the meetings more efficient. It was by dedicating 10 minutes to talk about non-business stuff with their team, made the business stuff way more effective. And so it's by re-injecting that human connection element to a quote unquote business meeting that the business got the most benefit, rather than just trying to jump right to the nuts and bolts and be super, super efficient.
I agree. My My favorite question along those lines, Karl, is what's got your attention? That's what I'll ask people. I'll say, what's got your attention today? And
Yeah.
I always encourage people to just tell me the first thing that pops into their mind. And it could be, I have a huge budget due next week, or it could be, I'm out of cat litter. You know, what's got your attention? And that often starts a conversation.
Yeah, I like that because it's it's a different kind of thing. Like I mean, people say, "What's on your mind?" Like, what are you thinking about? But then that almost seems like a prying. But to say, "What's got your attention?" Attention doesn't seem to be quite as loaded a question as the other one. So I like that because it's very much like in the moment, and it's not like it's it's very present, very in the moment, and it shows deeper interest than kind of the generic or the overused, like how are you doing sort of questions that everyone else is using. So yeah, what's got your attention? I'll have to make a note of that, and I will, if you don't mind me stealing it, I will.
You got it. You got it. I'm very happy to pass these things along. I only wish the entire human race would focus on being a better friend to others.
Excuse me. Yeah. And it's stuff that I mentioned this in the when I was doing the Toastmasters presentation, that it doesn't take a whole lot of effort or time,
right,
to make these simple gestures, and the whole conversation might take like 5-10 minutes, and it's not like you have to have huge stakes in the conversation, but especially with someone that you just met. But it's these little small investments in the relationships that can lead to much stronger relationships, and for the business, a lot stronger impact with clients and team members and all the different aspects of those relationships that the business relies on. Because people think, oh my gosh, I have to invest all this time and energy and attention on building these relationships, but it's about just kind of making it a simple habit of, when you meet someone that's like make a comment about, again, like something they chose to wear, or the way they get, like something that's like a pleasant compliment that's not about like their physical features they can't change.
Right.
That sort of thing is, if just making it a habit, which takes a little bit of effort, but it becomes like second nature. And I actually have one of my habits is like rules for myself is, if I go outside, like out of the house to do something, at least like once a day, I need to give someone a compliment, even if it's someone like a complete stranger. Just go out and compliment someone on the street, and it takes 2 seconds, and you'll get usually like a big smile from them. You never know how that's going to affect their day, how they share that with them. And especially if you're doing that with your team members in an office or in at a work event, that can pull someone out of a spiral. It gives them the inspiration to have a better client engagement, and all sorts of things that aren't necessarily easy to track, but can have a huge impact.
Yeah, and the thing of it is, I look at it almost like a treasure hunt, because you just never know who it is who needs that connection at that moment. And it may be 2% of the people you compliment each day. Some people may say, oh, that was nice. But there are a few people for whom, when they receive that compliment, it completely changes their day. And you just don't know who those people are. So that's like I said, it's almost like a treasure hunt to me. And when I say everybody has a story, yeah, everybody has a story. I remember I had to attend a business meeting. I had to take a trip, and I didn't really want to do it. I was kind of grumpy about it. And I was at dinner, and one of the other people in the company that I was presenting to showed me a picture. This woman had blonde hair, and she showed me a picture of a woman on her phone with long jet black hair. She said, who do you think that is? And I said, I don't know who that is. And she said, that's me. I said, it's you. How can that be you? You're blonde. She said, that's my mother's wig. My mother has advanced cancer. And I knew right then, like, okay, this is my hidden treasure. This person needs to talk. And she opened the door. And so, of course, I engaged in a conversation with her. Did I change her life? No, I didn't change her life. But for that moment, for those few moments, she got something she needed. She was able to connect with another human. And that's why I say it's a treasure hunt, because you just don't know who needs to express, who needs to feel a connection, who needs to feel heard, who needs to feel, I'll use a big word, love. Who needs to feel loved? And I don't mean in a romantic sense. I just mean in a human connection sense. And you're the expert at human connection. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Steve. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Steve, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.